Has anyone here ever shopped at Waitrose or John Lewis? Hands up. Good, cool. It's pretty nice, isn't it? I think the reason it's nice is not just all the yummy food and all the yummy products, but the people. The people that work there genuinely seem to want to help. And there's a good reason for that. They're all essentially co-owners of the firm, part of a John Lewis partnership. Those of you who don't know Waitrose, it's a UK supermarket, part of a group called John Lewis Partnership. And I'm really interested in this idea. I think, by the way, one of the things that's interesting about Waitrose is it's consistently one of the most trusted brands in the UK, in a time when trust is so important. And it's consistently awarded the Best Supermarket Award as well. So I think there's something interesting about this idea of ownership and participation. But can we actually take that idea and scale it within the organizations we work without necessarily changing the fiscal structure? Well, I think we can. I've seen some evidence of this. I'm going to talk about 3 stories of companies who've done this, the tools they use, the approach they use, and share 5 tips. Hopefully you can do the same thing in the companies or the organizations you work in. All of these organizations use an approach to solving problems called design thinking. Well, what is that? It's a human-centered approach to solving problems that's all about matching what people need to what's technologically feasible and what a viable business strategy can convert into market opportunity and value. And it has certain qualities. It's not necessarily about designers solving problems, and actually it's kind of the opposite. It's not about the lone genius. It's about recognizing that everybody's got something to contribute to the problems that we face within organizations and within society. Hence, collaboration. The idea that diverse inputs actually help you create better ideas, usually better and faster. It's about empathy, trying to understand the needs of the people that we serve, the customers, consumers, employees, first, before jumping to ideas. And it's about integrative thinking. What's that? Well, that's about kind of removing your ego, removing your assumptions, and taking diverse inputs into the problem-solving process in order to help make decisions. And it's about optimism, because the problems we tackle these days are so much more complex. Designers are very good at kind of thinking, how might we solve this, rather than, and moving forwards. Experimentation. Also, designers are very good at testing ideas early, creating small, cheap, low-cost, rapid prototypes to help you save money in the long run. So let's have a look at how these companies are using these ideas at scale using network technology to help create a greater sense of participation and ownership. Imagine you wake up one morning, you go to work, and you find the company you work for has gone through a $2 billion merger. And you get an email from your CEO inviting you to shape the future of that organization. Well, that's what happened in 2014 when Umpqua Bank acquired Sterling Financial Corporation, doubling its size and becoming overnight the US West Coast largest community bank. Umpqua seized upon its mission to become the world's greatest bank. Literally, by the way, you can call anyone at Umpqua or go to one of their stores, and they'll pick up the phone or answer and say, "Hello, this is Umpqua. Welcome to the world's greatest bank." It's kind of awesome. And as you can see from the pictures, they have yoga classes for customers. Which UK bank does that? They have got a kids area where kids can go and hang out and do it while you go and do your banking things. It's an amazing, very vibrant culture. And so CEO Ray Davis seized upon this opportunity to reinvest in an approach he'd used before called design thinking. Now, remember that 70% of mergers fail, according to one McKinsey report, and it's often thought that actually more value is destroyed than actually created. And I think this is often because it's often done on a very top-down approach. It's not thinking about how you bring together the people who actually work within the company and bind these cultures together to create one thing going forwards. So Umpqua tackled this challenge head-on, and they invited all of their associates and employees to take part in design challenges to help shape the future of the organization. Now, a couple of years later, it's generating unprecedented participation. About 84% of the organization regularly take part in challenges, not just to shape the future of the organization, but to help create new products and services. And they're using a platform based on our IDEO OI Engine. And I've just quickly explained what the heck that is. Well, we're a software product from IDEO. We take the way that IDEO has innovated for 40 years. And we help organizations use it within their organizations, with their customers as well, to create new products and services, or actually help to change their culture as well. It's not about IDEO necessarily solving problems for the company. It's actually about enabling and empowering them to do it for themselves. OK, so back to the story. So Umpqua's first challenge asked this question: how can we help associates and customers transition in times of change? And it actually encouraged the whole organization to collaborate in every step of the process. The first step was the research phase. And this asked employees to empathize, remember that quality, empathize with someone from the other bank. Go out and interview someone who does what you do, but from the other bank that we're merging with. And this led to some really wonderful stories. And in the platform, it challenges them to tackle these missions. Essentially, they're like sort of design methods. And for bonus points in this design method, it also asks them to go out and interview them, but for extra points, give up your time and volunteer to do something for that person. And this one story that this person shared was really wonderful because you had this wonderful kind of behavior happening within the bank when this happened. This person shared their story, and what they did is they actually went out and interviewed this person, but also they gave up their time unconditionally to someone from the other bank. Now, this is a really beautiful story, and someone in the next phase, in the ideas phase, built on that story, creating an idea called the buddy scheme. And the buddy scheme idea was so successful, it was amongst hundreds of other ideas, but it made through all these different steps to become one of the winning ideas at the end of the process. Then they took that idea and they created a new challenge, now crowdsourcing the detailed development and prototyping of that idea. They got 12 offices to pilot and prototype the idea. And then they took the feedback that was shared on the platform and then they reintegrated it, so remember that integrative thinking idea, back into the final design. It's now the new de facto way in which they onboard new employees. And this year, 1,000 people will go through that idea. What I love about this is it's really about bringing those two cultures together and ensuring that the bank stays successful as one company in the future. What they learnt from this approach is that by creating a way to involve employees in the participation in the future of the company, they not only created new business value, but actually helped to shape and change the culture as well. So they really used every step of this approach. Another company we work with is a major UK airline. Hands up if you've ever had that problem, especially on a long-haul flight, where you don't get your first choice of meal aboard the plane. Maybe you wanted the beef lasagna and you ended up with the, I don't know, the chicken curry. Anyone ever had that problem? Happened to me last week, actually. And so it's not just a problem for you because you don't get the food you want, but it's actually a massive problem for the airline. Imagine all the other customers who have that same problem. Also, it means that and it's really hard to predict what people want, right? On any given airline, on any given route. It also means they have to over-provision the plane with as much as 150% extra food, sometimes. And so that means extra cost, it means extra carbon miles. So it's a massive problem. So what do you do? Oh, and by the way, it affects their net promoter score, which is the #1 measurement for this particular airline, usually for most service organizations as well. So what they did is they recognized that actually cabin crew have the best insight around the customer. Every day they're picking up these fantastic anecdotal insights. They're like human synthesizers of information from customers. But very rarely are cabin crew or frontline staff actually empowered to share their insights or ideas, or even to actually help make decisions. Very rarely is that insight then fed back to the people actually making decisions in the catering team or in the products and services group. So what they did is they set up a platform where all of the cabin crew could participate. It now generates 88% participation across all of the cabin crew. It's about 12,000 staff. And they literally are able to design the menus for each month in advance for each of the routes. And this has led to an increase of 7%, an increase in Net Promoter Score in the very first month they did this. They've managed to maintain and continue to increase that over the last 5 years. And it's also meant that they're able to now not just design new menus for the plane, but help to provide insights around what's the future of the business class experience, or how should we actually design the new A380s? How much kitchen space do we need, or how should we actually lay out the seats? What makes sense for passengers? I think this idea of engaging frontline staff is really powerful. And when you can do that, it doesn't just create new value for the customer, it then creates new value for the business, and also then helps to change and shape the employee engagement and culture within the organization. And so actually it's interesting because the previous 3 platforms they had set up all got shut down because they weren't providing a structured or optimistic way of involving passengers in the process. But can you take that same approach of co-creation and use it actually directly with customers? Well, it turns out you can. Hewlett-Packard Enterprises 2 years ago set out to replace their existing ideas platform with one that was based on design thinking. They'd already started to use design thinking in small teams, but now they wanted to use it en masse across the organization and actually directly with customers. Their goal was to create $3 million in revenue and $3 million in cost savings. And they had some initial success with one key account, a large automotive company, getting 3,500 people, mostly developers and frontline staff within their organization and with the customer directly, to actually design a new interface for calculating loans for car dealerships. So when you go and get your quote for your loan. They also, their first challenge was led to 25% cost reduction and schedule reduction, and $1.75 million in revenue potential just within 6 months. This is for a large, fast-moving goods company. But what I love is they took that same idea and they applied it to all of their key accounts, 7xing that number in 6 months, which kind of speaks to the idea of looking at what are the shared problems within organizations and how solutions can actually be replicated across using some kind of transparent and collaborative process. When I spoke to our client there, though, he actually said that the real value isn't just this more tangible return on investment, but how it's actually helping to transform the relationships they have with their business-to-business accounts. And that in itself is creating much greater return on investment. So we've seen how these different organizations can use this idea of participation and ownership at scale using network technology to create a greater sense of ownership, that kind of softer side of ownership. I'm going to share with you 5 tips for how you can use the same ideas within your companies too. So first of all, empathy. Remember how Umpqua challenged their associates to actually empathize with someone from the other bank, and doing that created a greater sense of cohesion in times of change. Well, a simple way of doing this is take a project you're working on or a customer you can think of and really trying to understand where they're coming from. What are they doing when they're using your product or service? Create an empathy map. Integrative thinking. Remember how Umpqua took the ideas from associates and reintegrated it back into that final buddy scheme idea. It's about not necessarily saying that HR has all the answers, but actually removing those assumptions and getting the input from the rest of the organization, integrating it into the final design. So another way you can do that, remove your assumptions, is by looking at analogous situations. So think again about a customer or a problem, the problem they're tackling. Think about the behaviors they're doing and look at another situation where you could learn from. So let's say you're relocating employees in HR. Well, maybe you can go and speak to a wedding planner. They're actually really good at thinking about those multiple, managing different stakeholders. Or maybe you're focusing on a time-critical operation. Go and look at pit crews. Those guys are really fantastic at figuring out how you have to use different tools in a time-critical situation and making sure the driver knows exactly who to speak to. So there's lots of areas you can learn from. Optimism. Remember how the previous platforms in the airline all got shut down because they weren't fostering optimism? Well, we can learn from the world of improv. One of the rules of improv is yes and. If it's no but, it destroys the scene. It doesn't work. So I challenge you in your next meeting, or board meeting even, set a rule for 5 minutes, maybe 3, that everyone has to use yes and. It could be really interesting. I'd love to hear the results. Experimentation. Remember how Umqua crowdsourced the experimenting and piloting of those ideas? So one way you can do this is, again, next time you're in a meeting, and maybe you disagree with someone's idea, challenge them to create a very quick, low-cost prototype or experiment of the idea of what they're thinking about to test their assumptions. Because often it's the assumptions which create the disagreement. And finally, collaboration. So remember how Hewlett-Packard had actually really co-creating directly with their customers? Well, why not invite a customer to your next brainstorm? And it might even work better if it's not something to do with their particular account or what they do. You'd be really surprised at the results, I think. So to sum up, next time you're in Waitrose, for those of you who haven't been, go, it's great. Look around you and notice the people that work there. And imagine your own company or organization has that same sense of shared participation and ownership. Thank you.